all for joining us tonight on this beautiful night. I know everyone's itching to get outside. Tonight is the second Q&A webinar that we're going to be doing as a part of Historic Albany Foundation and the Albany County Land Bank's Restoration Fair. We're doing it virtually this year since we can't all be together in person. So we have a whole group of excellent panelists with us tonight. We have Sam Wells, the Vacant Building Coordinator for the City of Albany, Erica Gann from the Land Bank. We have Fran Stern from Preservation Office, who does tax credits. We have Barb Nelson and Lisa Rodriguez from TAP to answer all of your architectural-based questions. So without further ado, we will get on with our evening and start with some questions. Okay. Let's see, I'm assuming a lot of people have seen some of the videos and things going on about Clinton Avenue. One of the questions initially is about tax credits for that project. The question is, even though construction's already been started on 569 Clinton Avenue, but this could be applied to any project where construction's already started, can you still apply for tax credits even though, in this instance, construction's already partially underway while you're purchasing the property?
Yeah, we get asked that a lot, and it's definitely possible. Generally, we would ask at the state that you contact us before you start a project, but we realize that sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes you might also have an emergency situation where you need to replace your furnace because it's the middle of winter, or you have a structural problem that you need to take care of. And we always say that health and safety comes first, so take care of what you need to take care of, and let us know as soon as you can, and we can certainly work something out with tax credits. It happens more often than you'd think, and it's okay.
And for anyone who's just joining us now, we had a few more people just join. If you'd like to ask questions, please ask them live. We have some questions that were sent to us already, but we would love to take your questions now. There's a Q&A button at the bottom that you can push. You can type your questions there. Or if you'd like, you can raise your hand and we can call on you and you can ask your questions. So please feel free to start asking questions so we can ask or answer your questions. And if anyone feels shy and doesn't want to start off, we'll kind of keep going with some of the pre-asked questions. Let's see, another question that was asked, do you need an architect to rehab a vacant building?
So the architects will chime in. Most buildings you will need an architect if they need extensive renovation. So in the city of Albany, there is a dollar limit. It's probably in the $10,000 to $20,000 range. Maybe Sam knows that better than I do. But if there's going to be anything structural being done, anything having to do with plumbing, mechanical systems, health and safety related items, then yes, you're going to need to submit a set of documents showing how your work will meet the building code. And if a building is a gut, you can be sure that yes, you're going to need plans. If you don't really need to do that much work, then it might be a gray area, but you're going to want to call the building department, describe what you're doing, and let them help you determine. Is there any better way to answer that, Lisa?
Nope. I would just add that if you want to add any units, so let's say if it's a 2-unit and you're trying to make it a 3-unit, definitely you need an architect's help. That kicks in significantly different code requirements. And if there was, let's say if it's a house with a gable roof and you're trying to use an attic that was not previously used, that would be considered a 3rd story. That's dangerous code territory too, and you definitely need the help of an architect to wade through that code situation.
And you know what, even if you aren't required to have an architect by law, by the building department, we still think it's a good idea that we can help you explore some things that you might not have thought of, and maybe we can help you make the project a little easier on yourself.
Just generally add, it's never a bad idea to call us and ask. Feel free to give the building department phone number or ring. We're more than happy to answer that question or any other question. There's never really any general one rule as to whether you will need an architect or what type of permit you may require. But we're more than happy to answer your questions and help guide you through that process.
Thanks.
you guys. All excellent answers. Thank you. One question that came up is, do they need to take their house back? So it may not be a land bank building, just kind of any building. Do they need to take that back to what it originally looked like? Fran, I'll let you take that from a tax credit standpoint, and then I can chime in with a little bit of that too.
From a tax credit standpoint, you definitely don't have to take it back to what it looked like originally. We know that it's the best idea to accept the building as it is currently. So if it's missing historic features, it doesn't mean that you automatically have to put them back in order to qualify for a tax credit. I think the tax credit program also recognizes that this is your home. This is a building that people are going to live in and inhabit and use. It's not a museum. It's not something that is supposed to be uninhabitable or unfriendly. And so from our perspective, you certainly don't have to put back features that are lost. You can definitely take the building as it is there. If you are interested in adding something back that's no longer there, then we would ask that you have significant proof that feature was there. So like if your building is missing a porch and you have a historic photo, we have had some tax credit cases over the years where we've been able to work with homeowners who are looking to make significant changes, but they have historic photographs that show this is exactly how it was, this is what we're interested in doing, and that kind of serves as proof and a good roadmap for getting to that point. But again, this is something that you would work individually with your SHPO representative on. And so just like if you have questions about whether or not you need an architect, if you have questions about your tax credit project or how to approach that, definitely just give us a call. We're here to talk about these things.
Thank you. And I just want to second too that it's definitely not expected that you have to take your house back to look historic, as Fran very succinctly put. Buildings change over time, and we kind of accept them as a part of the building's history and its life. So you certainly don't have to. The Historic Resources Commission, if you're in a local district in Albany, when you're doing work on your building, it is not expected that you have to take it back to what it looked like. So if you're going to be redoing your stoop or painting anything, you don't have to find what the original paint colors are to go back to that. So it's certainly not that stringent. One of our questions back to architects is an architectural consultation free?
No. At TAP, we are nonprofit architects, and so we are a little more free than others, but not entirely free. Usually, we will come and visit you at your building and get a sense of what it is you want to do, spend an hour, look through the building and get a feel for it, and then we'll be able to send you a good proposal for services. What was I going to? Oh, I think most architects would do that. I don't know if most commercial or residential architects would charge just for that visit or not. But just ask when you talk to an architect on the phone. Just ask if there's a fee up front.
Yeah, and I'll just add, even if there is a fee, usually there's a lot that can be learned in that initial visit by having the architect walk through. So we don't charge for that initial visit, but you certainly get a lot of information during that walkthrough. So even if somebody charged, it's usually valuable service.
Thank you. Let's see. Another one for the architects says, so what are the important things to look at when you're looking to purchase a vacant building? Are there kind of key things to look at? I know some examples that I would recommend, like the roof or foundation. What are kind of the critical things that you would recommend people really look at critically when they're going through a vacant building to purchase?
I'll let Lisa take that one off the top, and then I'll fill in.
Good question.
Yeah, structure for sure, and especially because a lot of these buildings are 100+ years old, and the systems were designed to last 100+ years, but here we are. And so some of them are starting to fail. So a brick building may appear sturdy, but if you look more closely, you may see that withes are delaminating, or you may see that, oh, it's got a slate roof. Well, most of the slate roofs that were installed are at the end of their useful life, and it's time to replace them. So just like you said, the roof, the structure, and a very unpopular subject, look for hazardous materials, potential hazardous materials. Some things can be dealt with directly by a homeowner, and you can look at the state's website to see what they allow homeowners to deal with, which can save you money, but obviously has its own hazards associated with it. And then, like I was alluding to before, if you want to change the use in some way, that could be a code quagmire. So you want to make sure that it's allowed. Whatever, if you're taking a storefront and want to make it into an apartment, or if you're taking an attic and want to make it more living space, don't just assume that you can do those types of things without looking at zoning or the building code.
We're actually going to be doing a webinar on all the permitting, including zoning and what's allowable in certain districts and things like that, who to contact and whatnot in July. So keep on our schedule for that if anyone has questions about what is allowable in either your existing building or building you're looking to purchase, because we find a lot of buildings have been chopped up into 3, 4 family units, but the neighborhood's really zoned for 2. And so we see people rehab a building into the same number of units thinking, well, it was that, why can't I do it again? And all of a sudden they get all these violations and they can't get a C of O or certificate of occupancy. And that's just not the road you want to go down, so.
Right. And on that same subject, I've had a client come to me and say, similarly, I bought this building as a 5-unit building, but I didn't know the 5th unit was not installed legally. And boy, was that expensive to make that into a legal unit, very expensive. So, and he had no way of knowing that it wasn't a legal unit. It was represented to him as 6th unit, whatever, 5th unit, whatever it was, by the realtor. Mm-hmm. And he took them at their word. So you have to, buyer beware, right? Do your research.
And now I think the zoning is available on this is the city of Albany. You can see what a building, or at least what the neighborhood is zoned for on the map geo. Sam, I don't know if you're familiar enough with that to confirm whether or not that's totally correct. But I know you're able to look up, I think, the zoning per property. So at least it's one more place that you can look to kind of get a little bit more information. That's something that I would always recommend, is looking at that.
Yes.
Because there's definitely more information. You can also see if it's in a historic district, because we find a lot of people buy properties, and again, whether the way it was portrayed either from a realtor or if it was just for sale by owner, no one told them it was a historic district. They had no idea. They had to even look to see if it was a historic district, and all of a sudden, oh, we did all this work without permits and we're getting stop work orders, or I had no idea that was the case, and all kinds of worms.
Yep. Yeah, I'll put a link to the website. It's the Albany Map Geo website, where you can look up what the zoning is for each property in the city. And then, of course, following up on that, our zoning code is available online as well. But if it helps people helps people feel a bit more comfortable, please feel free to call us. We're more than happy to answer any questions about zoning, how many units you can fit in a building, etc. Anytime. The building code number is 518-434-5995. I'll put that in the chat as well.
I could add that when you're first looking at a building, just not to fall in love with the building. It's really easy. We're all people who fall in love with buildings, and we can really get our heart broken. You're looking for signs that water is coming in where it's not supposed to. You're looking for as Lisa said, hazardous materials, and that can be any number of types of materials. But and the bad news is that pretty much all of our 100-and-some-year-old buildings have these materials. Yeah, that's bad news, but the good news is so many buildings have this, that there are contractors that deal with them. There are laws, regulations. There's training you can take so that you can learn how to deal with it safely. I always would tell people too, don't just look in the building, but look out the windows. Is this something you want to see, every morning at breakfast? Look at the neighborhood and make sure it's a place that you really want to live and be involved. Talk to neighbors if you can. Don't just focus on the building and the building bones, but is it a place that you that you really want to live, just because it has a wonderful staircase or beautiful mantels, but you have to redo the whole floor plan. Really think about it holistically. Think about it as a whole community.
Thank you. All right, one of our attendees questions that they purchased a 1755 stone home earlier this year, and the house is in need of remortaring between the stones. Can they apply for funding? I think there's potential funding. It depends on where the building is, and certain income levels. The City of Albany, the Albany Community Development Agency has certain homeowner programs, but they're income dependent. And you have to be within the City of Albany. If you're outside the City of Albany, there are different programs, whether you're in different counties. I know there's the Rural Albany County Housing Alliance or whatnot, I can't remember the acronym, but they have some that are outside the city limits in Albany County for homeowners. Again, some of them have income level requirements, some don't. Tax credits are the thing that I tout most of all for homeowners. If you're individually listed or in a historic district, it's really the best incentive to look at. And Frank can talk a little bit more about that now, even, and she's going to be on our funding webinar that we're going to be doing next week, talk more in detail about tax credits, eligibility, and whatnot. So I don't know if your house is listed or not, but that would definitely affect what funding is out there. So it really depends on where you are, and then whether it's your personal residence and income levels. So if you want to even email me directly at the end, I'm going to put everyone's email up that's on, and so you can email us directly with questions, and we can kind of work that out with you specifically. Let me see, questions. Okay, another question is, we're preparing for an inspection at a new property on First Street. Who are some essential members of the inspection, I'm assuming team, that you'd recommend, considering this is a pretty significant rehabilitation with a home from 1862? Who wants to start with that one?
I heard that.
Looks like there's a property on First Street in Albany from 1862 that they're about to start a large-scale rehabilitation of, and wanted to know essential members of, it says, of the inspection, or I guess people that we want to take a look at. You definitely want to have architects. If they notice anything glaring, probably a structural engineer. Anytime you're buying a property, I would highly recommend having your home inspected. If you do plan on making it a rental unit, definitely contacting the city and finding out, yes, are there enough numbers? You could have an inspector. I don't know if they do inspections, Sam, maybe you can speak more to that. I don't know if they come out and do almost like a pre-inspection or anything like that. Maybe an architect would be better, I think, in that sense, to help you figure out, okay, here's some code issues, things that need correcting.
Yeah, I think start with your own architect or engineer first. Of course, we're going to need to do inspections for any permits that you'll be applying for, but your architect and engineer will be your best friend in helping you through that process.
And if you need architects or engineers, members of Historic Albany Foundation do have access. We have a preservation-friendly contractors list that does include architects and engineers who are very familiar with the historic buildings, how they stand up, what their failures are, how do you fix them. So we do have that available for members, but also a lot of neighborhood associations as well. If you put out, does anyone have someone that they've worked with, you may find someone that your neighbors are familiar with so that they know the building typologies of the neighborhood and whatnot too. I don't know, Lisa or Barb, if you guys have any other recommendations on the best way to find architects or engineers for projects like this.
I don't know of any clearinghouse place. I mean, we get calls all the time saying, do you do that? I think you really just need to call around. And probably a good source is actually the building code department, because they know what architects have been submitting plans for buildings of that type in that area. And they'll usually give you 2 or 3 names. I don't know, I've never had to find an architect, so I've never really faced that.
I was going to say the same thing. The building department, at least our local building department in Troy, will give people names. I think you do in Albany too as well. Sam, is that true?
Yeah, we can tell you who we've worked with in the past. Obviously, we don't, we don't want to favor anybody over another. So everybody who we've worked with In particular, when you're looking for electricians and plumbers, we have a list of who's licensed in the city of Albany. Regardless of your municipality, you want to check licensing laws for plumbers and electricians before you begin your work. But yeah, we can absolutely help you figure out to an extent who you can go to.
I'm also going to add quickly that architect and engineering fees, permits, all that stuff, that counts for tax credits too. So if your building qualifies for tax credits and you're going to get started doing all these inspections and making some of those soft costs to get started, that's a pretty perfect way to start out a tax credit application. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. And that same, I believe that also applies for any grants you may receive from municipality. That funding can also be anything you spend that is eligible for tax credits. I don't think the state office necessarily cares where the funding is coming from. So a lot of that grant work can potentially be eligible for tax credits. Correct me if I'm wrong, Fran.
We have another question that vein. Will an architect consultation cover the mass majority of the project budget and timeline section of the Albany County Land Bank purchase application?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing. I got to turn off my air conditioning system. I can't hear you.
I can speak louder and clearer too if I'm too far.
One consultation with an architect is probably not going to get you budget figures for a project. Really, talking with a builder is the best way to get numbers and to be realistic. Really, architects are just making educated guesses on their past experience, and builders who are out there in the trenches doing the work every day, they understand the actual costs of things. So we always recommend that clients talk to builders to get pricing. I mean, we can do estimates. It's pricey for us to do an estimate, it's time consuming. But a builder, if they have a chance of getting the job, is willing to spend the time on it.
I think, like you said too, is you'll definitely get a bit more of an accurate representation. I think from a builder, like said, who's looking at it, going through is okay, this is how much time it would take me and whatnot. And I think the details would give any prospective buyer a bit better sense of, okay, here's the scale of the work and really all of the work that needs to be done too. So always getting another contractors and architects involved together. It takes a big team to really get a vacant building off the ground to get.
Yes. There are a lot of people that are going into it that plan to do the work themselves, and they'll tell me something like, well, I'm going to do it for $40,000. And like, oh, okay. Normally it would be 150,000 or 200,000. But okay. They're telling me that their cousin is a plumber and their father's an electrician and they're going to do a lot of the work themselves. I'm like, okay, I can't argue with that, but I can't say that it could be done for that price.
And there are so many hidden things that pop up too that you find that, oh, you really don't have the skill set for that because you had no idea that problem was going to pop up. Whereas someone who's done a lot more, they can be like, they've been in a lot more buildings and done these rehabs, will really be able to take it. Here's the pitfalls to watch for. So if you haven't done one before, being like, oh, I'm going to do all the work myself, it's kind of it can be a slippery slope sometimes. You definitely you want people that know what they're doing behind you when you're taking on a project at that scale, especially some of these vacant buildings where they really need a lot of work. They're not a small lift.
I have to say, though, there are people who can do it, and there
That's
are
true.
people who do. And I have to say, myself and 4 naive friends, we right out of college bought a building for $8,000, but we lived in it. We lived in conditions that no one would ever, we would never, you'd never be able to rent a place. A landlord would be in violation if they allowed us to live like that. But we were young and we had time on our hands and a lot of energy, and we were architects, right? So, but there are people who can do it. It just takes a lot longer. So there's the triangle of truth. We all want things fast. We all want them inexpensively, and we all want them done right, but we can only get 2 of those. So if you want it done right and inexpensively yourself, is going to take a long time. I think it took us 10 years, to get to that place of getting a C of O, but because we owned it, we could live there. And we didn't mind living in a house that had half a heating system and that kind of thing. Most people are looking for a little more immediate gratification. So don't mean to scare people away entirely. We do a lot of drawings for people who are going to do the work themselves. So we give them the basics. That's how we keep our fees lower. They choose their own products. They do their own, interior setup. But we make sure they meet code. And everybody believes they can learn anything on YouTube. And these rehab shows that, finish a house in a week makes everybody believe everything can go so fast. Those people should just be, they should be banned from TV. But it is fun, and there's a great advantage in doing it yourself, but it's going to take a lot of time. So try to help people be realistic.
Knowing your skills and I think what you're comfortable doing is helpful. I know for myself, we bought a house and we're like, okay, we can do all this work in our barn, all this work. I'm like, okay, no, that's beyond me. I can do some of that, but you have to know what your limits are to forget it. Yeah. Like I said, though, some people definitely can. They have the capabilities to do it.
And then it's a curse. I mean, because I can do it, I don't want to hire anybody else to do it. And then I realize, oh, God, I want to do something else with my life. I want to be in this attic every weekend of the summer.
Someone's asking the specific work that you should never do yourself, that you should always hire a professional to do. I would say assess structural problems, unless you are a structural engineer or an architect. But Barb and Lisa, any other recommendations there, things that you would always hire a professional to do?
I mostly default to professionals. They've got all the special tools. They know all the tricks that I am not a do-it-yourselfer. I really value professionals of all types, whether it's plaster, sheetrock, plumbing, electric, concrete. I value them all and their knowledge. But I know it's a luxury to be able to hire people to do the things you want to do. Not everybody can afford to do that. But when you can, I think it's usually well worth it. As long as they are expert in what they do. You have to vet the contractors before you hire them. That's very important.
Always check references and never pay up front.
And we recommend to, call at least 2 or 3 different contractors. Don't silo yourself with one necessarily. You want to compare and contrast and go with what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking.
Yeah. Barb just made a good point about paying up front. A lot of contractors do require a payment up front. It could be something like half when I start, half when I'm halfway done, kind of thing, or a third up front. By law, they're required, if you give them an advance payment, they're supposed to put it in an escrow account with yours and their name on it. I have never heard of a contractor doing that. What I try to do to work with a contractor that needs to get the money fairly quickly because they don't have a lot of their own capital to work with is I say, you may get paid the day you start. Tell me a fair number that covers your time into it, your permit, your materials that you needed for that first day, and we'll endeavor to get you paid some part of the money on the first day you're on the job. But I've been told many times by clients that they've paid contractors money in advance, and then they found it impossible to get the contractor on the job site. So I do not recommend that at all. It's not the legal way to do things unless the money's in escrow. And if they're so broke that they can't wait till the first day that they get on your job, then you don't want them on your job, most likely.
New York State Attorney General's office has a good summary of recommendations and tips to follow, which encompasses a lot of what Liza and Barb were just talking about. I can post the link in the chat again. We also generally in the buildings department have flyers that the Attorney General's office provides us with that all-in-one handy dandy sheet. So.
Someone asks, is there any reading material, books, magazines, whatnot that you should read as opposed to YouTube videos? That's a really good kind of 101 for rehabbing a home. I find my first go-to always, whether it's for a property that's looking to do it themselves, someone hiring it, anytime you're taking on any kind of rehab or even large repair work, are preservation briefs. These are small, almost like brochure pamphlet size documents put together by the National Park Service by experts from all across the country. And they've been doing these for, I think, since the Park Service, probably back there, the Preservation Act was passed in '66. But they're a great grouping of articles, and it really runs the gamut of everything you'd be looking at. There's a section on masonry, repointing, there's like a porch one, there's pretty much anything you're looking to do done, there's a brief for it. So that's really my go-to initial one. Barb, Lisa, I don't know if you have ones that you would recommend as really a good, this is a great kind of 101 thing to look at.
Well, those are great. I think that that's a great starting point. And I should mention, there are courses you can take too. Trip has a great series of kind of DIY classes, and even if you're not going to rewire your whole house yourself, taking a 2-hour class helps you communicate with the electrician and kind of understand some of the language and some of the requirements. But they've got electrical, plumbing. I don't know how they're doing it right now, perhaps, but because it's not a YouTube, it's like this, you're getting information and you can ask questions. And because they are gearing their kind of education to people who may be first-time homeowners and may, need to do just a small repair here or there. So it's really geared toward, not like, this old house where you can see, amazing, preservation of stone, brownstone and, these amazing materials where we would say, oh, you really should hire a professional to do these things. Yeah, so places like Trip, and I'm not quite sure in Albany whether those courses are offered.
I don't think we have the same kind. There's more like first-time home buyer, landlord education programs to affordable.
Right. The Trip is not, anybody can come from the region. It's not, and you don't have to take all the courses. You can do just the basic, framing, plumbing, and hardware if you want, or so it's a really good resource.
The big thing we have is really the Hudson Valley program. If you're looking to do window repair, there's a window repair course, there's a masonry basics, there's a carpentry course, the plaster course is going to be run for the first time in the fall. So if there's any of those kind of 4 topics that you're looking at doing and you have an interest in doing it yourself, or you want to know a little bit more about how to do it so that when you hire someone, you kind of know they're doing the right thing, which really is a key thing. And I do recommend really educating yourself on whatever project you're going to be doing, is knowing a little bit about it so whoever you've hired really is doing the right work, and you can kind of review that a little bit to make sure it's not like you're just trusting them to do the right job and whatnot. And the same thing goes for kind of permitting, is knowing what permits you need, especially if you're in a local historic district. You need a certificate of appropriateness. I can't tell you how many times you've seen people get a stop work order because the contractor didn't have experience working in a local historic district, started doing work without a permit. Of course, the neighbor calls and you get a stop work order, and that's just not good either. One of the other references that actually I really like that I picked up in grad school is a great book called Caring for Your Historic House. And it's really kind of a great book for, I find, property owners. It's almost like a maintenance guide with some of the key things to look at. And it looks at, again, masonry, a lot of the kind of just general woodwork repair. Roofs obviously have a big section. But I think that's another great guide. I don't know if it's available free anywhere. I know Amazon has it. But that's a book that I quite like.
TAP recently finished a set of guidelines for the historic district for Troy, but we put them on our website just as good guidelines. So you can find them on TAP's website under resources. And it's mostly exterior because it's historic district preservation. So it's what the city's going to be looking at in that district where they're not coming inside. But there's masonry and there's carpentry and there's windows and there's signage, and it's a real one-pager per topic with lots of photos. So we think it's kind of helpful.
Someone's asking the series that you're talking about real quick. The TRIP programs, they wanted if it was spelled TRIPS, TRIPS. TRIP is the acronym. It's the Troy Rehabilitation
Improvement Program.
Thank you. And we can post their website where you can go to.
I can do that.
Good stuff. So sorry.
I'll add one thing. It's a little bit technical, but I often refer to the Building Science Corporation's website and their details. If you're considering insulating an older building that hasn't been insulated before, you might check out the Building Science Corporation's website for details.
Yep. Okay. Building Science, I'll put that in the chat. What is it? Building Science Corporation?
Yeah.
Okay. All good things to look at. These are all great resources. And we can be posting some of this too on our Facebook page. After the last Q&A that we did, we had posted a lot of resources with the
make sure these are right.
Posted the recording of the webinar. So we can do that again as well, so that all of these links come in. As this is being recorded, it's also being streamed live on Facebook right now. But I don't know if the chat and all the comments that are kind of coming in, I don't know if they're all getting copied into the recording. So we can post all of these links again on the Restoration Fair Facebook group page. So don't worry if you're not catching all this now or frantically writing anything down.
Okay.
You can definitely send this all out to everyone. And then we have emails for everyone who has signed up for it. So we can also send you an email if you like, or if you want to email us, we can send you all this information as well. Because I see a lot of really great links and resources being posted kind of in the chat section for all of the attendees. So I'll lose all that good information. All right, we have about 15 minutes left. I kind of want to open up if there's anyone else that has a question they're just bringing to ask. I want to make sure we get to those before we go to some of the ones that were sent in before, just because obviously if you're participating now, we want your questions to be answered. Let's see if there's anyone else that's interesting. No, everyone's shy tonight. Everyone started asking questions very quickly last time, but I guess we're just covering so much information. Okay, a few other questions. One really good one, I think, is since we're a little bit technical tonight anyway, we started talking about some of the toxins that you can find in historic buildings. One question is, does every old building have asbestos and lead? How do you know if there's lead and asbestos, either in your existing home or a home you're looking to purchase?
Well, so there's a great, the New York State lead safety information you'll find at health.ny.gov. You should put that in. Yeah, just about every building built after, or before 1960, you're going to find lead paint. And there are definitely some good guidelines, good processes laid out to follow to take care of that. Asbestos, same thing. You can look at some resources and understand how to spot it. It's a flaky, fibery sort of material, and it's usually packed around pipe joints, old cast iron pipes. It was used as insulation, or you'll see it packed around a furnace. It kind of looks like an old cheap plaster that'll scratch off. And again, there are ways to deal with it, and contractors who can deal with it. Mold is probably the one that scares us the most, because sometimes it's visible and sometimes it's not. Especially with vacant houses, the first thing, once one does purchase and take ownership of a vacant building, I like to just open it up, just get out what needs to get out, do the gutting that you need to get done, and then you know, leave it open but safe, you know, arrange the windows in such a way that you can just get some good air through there. But yeah, you need to look for mold, for asbestos, for lead paint, and just don't be surprised to find any of them. But, you know, check all the resources that we've laid out and you can see, you know, how to deal with them. What other, you know, if you've got an old oil tank in the basement and you can see that it's leaked all over, that's an issue. And these are things, if you're dealing with a private buyer, you can say, oh, these things need to be done, and then I'll take over. Maybe Erica could speak to how the land bank deals with some of these issues. But usually, you know, with a vacant building, you're getting a piece of property for a very low price, but you're buying all of the issues that come with it. Erica, I put you on the spot.
Absolutely. You know, you can see if people are often attracted to land bank properties because of the lower asking price. But that's exactly right, Barb. All of our properties are sold as is, and we don't have that type of back and forth negotiation that you will often see on the private market. So it is as is, and it is on the buyer to remove those things.
Mm-hmm.
Fran, do you want to talk a little bit about whether or not asbestos and lead removal is a qualified rehabilitation expense under the tax credit? Because there are a significant number of land bank properties where they would be eligible for tax credits. So that could that get wrapped into a tax credit project?
You're muted.
I'm muted, sorry. There was a leaf blower in the back. Yeah, absolutely. Those definitely would count as qualified rehabilitation expenditures. It's to make the property inhabitable, safe, healthy. Those are things that are directly connected to the building and its systems. So we see projects all the time where people are doing some asbestos or lead remediation, and it's good to take care of those things.
I should plug, if you don't mind, our community development agency does have a grant for lead abatement for both homeowners and rental units. However, it is based on income eligibility, so I would call or view the guidelines online first before applying, just to save yourself time in case you are not eligible.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Someone's asking, where can they find parts that kind of either fit into their old house or look like they're historic? A shameless plug, I will say, is the Architectural Parts Warehouse over on Lexington Avenue next to Historic Albany's office. Also in our building is the Architectural Parts Warehouse. It's the other part of what we do. And whenever a building is going to be demolished and can't be saved, or if people are doing renovation projects and they're removing things, we get a lot of that. So if you're looking for a radiator because one of yours is broken, or you want to put radiators back in, we do actually see that a lot. We always have radiators and clawfoot bathtubs, but we also have a lot of doors and windows. I would say sash probably aren't the hottest seller all the time. But if you do have a historic home and your one sash is either missing or someone replaced one of the front windows with a glaring white vinyl window and the rest of them are historic, you may find something that matches at the warehouse. So I always recommend looking at the Architectural Parts Warehouse. And if you can't find something with us, we do have a similar organization out in Ithaca. Historic Ithaca has significant elements that also has architectural salvage if you are looking for that kind of authentic historic character to put either back into your building or even new buildings. We see that a lot too. So.
And can I make a plug for retaining original windows and restoring them? A lot of old homeowners, owners of older homes, excuse me, think that the first thing they should do is throw out those old windows and get brand new windows. And I'll just say that the old windows, if with some weather stripping and a little repair and locking the sash to draw them tight together, and the addition of a storm window can be very effective. If they're not fixed, they can be drafty. But if you put a little time into them and make them work properly and weather strip them, they can be very effective. And while these modern windows are pretty airtight and have double glazing, they have a lifespan, and they only last maybe between 15 and 20 years, I would say. And then you're going to be replacing all the windows again. And that's a pretty big project to do a second time around or a third time around. And a lot of the newest windows are so efficient, you can't even replace the glazing on them. You have to replace a whole sash. So in that case, you want to make sure your window is either so cheap that you can replace the whole thing, or so good that the company will still be in business to get a new sash for it. So I really would make a plug for saving the original windows, working on them, make them energy efficient, and they often are one of the major character defining features of your house. So, you know, paying attention to the muntin patterns and where the sash falls. Those things are part of what makes your house look to be of the period that it was built in. My plug.
There's a lot of resources out there too. There are lots of studies that have been done that show that restoring your windows really do give you the same energy efficiency as new windows. I think that's kind of a common misconception, is that if you put in a new window, automatically you get way better energy efficiency and whatnot, and that's really not the case. We see a lot of the time too, where especially when draftiness is the issue, the underlying problem really isn't necessarily the sash themselves. We find there's openings around the window frame, and there's a whole technical Tuesday about this. We don't need to get into it in great detail, but we find, you know, a little bit of caulking under the window sill and whatnot. Like a lot of times that's where a lot of the drafts are coming in. And when you're putting in new windows, it's a whole unit that fits into the frame, and if that's not carefully caulked, you're still leaving openings for air to come in. So new windows really aren't always the answer for more energy efficiency and really retaining all of that heat. All right, we have a couple questions before we head out, as it's already 20 after 6. Wow, that came up fast. Someone's asking, do porches count toward the New York State tax credit, as they're not inside the house? Are they still eligible?
Yeah, they are definitely eligible, but like I was talking about earlier, if the home currently doesn't have a porch and you'd like to add one, we would need to see some historic photos indicating that there was a porch there originally. But if you're doing work on the exterior of your home, like maybe you have a porch and you're stripping some of the paint, restaining, making some repairs to the columns of the porch, that all counts, because the tax credit program actually does have a 5% exterior spending threshold. So you have to spend at least $5,000 and you have to do at least 5% of that work on the exterior. So a porch would be a great way to meet that exterior requirement if you're not doing other work on the outside, like repointing or window repair, things like that.
Here's a tricky porch question. What if you have an enclosed porch? Like if you have a fabulous bungalow and someone had enclosed your porch, but you don't have a good photograph or architectural drawing showing what it looked like, but you want to reopen that porch? If there's no drawings or photographs, can you use other examples of kind of neighboring buildings or whatnot when there's still something there, but it's really not all intact underneath?
Yeah, that would be something that we could consider, but that sounds like a really specific example where we'd have to be looking very carefully at photos of your property and talking exactly about what you'd like to do, maybe seeing some drawings, because basically the standards that we review the tax credit applications by are the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And so one of those standards is about not creating a false sense of history. So if we don't know that there was a porch there, but you can imagine that there was because there were a lot of porches built in that time period, we really aren't comfortable making decisions like that if we're not absolutely certain. But again, we do a lot of one-on-one consultation with people that are making tax credit applications, and it's really fun. Honestly, we get to learn all about your house and your property and how to help, and so I would be happy to have that conversation.
Once we're able to again. All right, well, as it is 6:25, do any of the other participants, are there any other questions from all of you? If not, I'll ask the panelists if there's anything else they want to share, any other questions from the public? don't see any hands going up. Okay. Panelists, is there anything you'd like to share before we sign off for the evening? We are going to be doing another one of these at the end of July. Of course, I don't have the date off the top of my head. We'll be posting schedules. So we'll be doing another Q&A in July. The next upcoming events, we're going to be doing our funding webinar next week. The dates are all there. I think it's the 30th. So Fran will be back again. She's our repeat offender for webinars. We bug Fran all the time to come do stuff with us. And poor Erica, she's constantly doing things with HAF. We suck up everyone's time. And then we will be having a permitting webinar the first week of July. So all of your questions about needing a certificate of appropriateness, if you're in a historic district, what variances do you need? Building permits, how do you apply for one? What needs a building permit? What doesn't? So all of that will be in upcoming webinars. Anything else, panelists?
No, I'll just say thank you for having us. It was, I always learn something. It's great when I meet up with you guys.
Yeah, thank you. This was excellent. And thank you guys all for joining with us. It was great to see everyone here.
It's good.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'll put up the slide with everyone's contact information. So if you do have any specific questions, if it's about a tax credit application that you want to ask Fran about, or you want to have Barb and Lisa and all the wonderful folks at TAP come out and look at your house, or if you have vacant building questions and other permitting questions for Sam, if you want to buy a property from Erica, everyone's contact information is here. We can also post this again on our Restoration Fair page. So if you aren't frantically writing things down, we've got you covered. And then I want to thank our sponsors for the evening. The New York State Council on the Arts is always a wonderful supporter of Historic Albany Foundation, all the programs that we do. And Aurora Insurance is also a wonderful supporter of a lot of the technical programming that we do. So thank you to them for making this possible. So thank you for joining us. If anyone has any further questions that they think of last minute, because of course there's always the one that escapes you, please feel free to contact us, post it on the Restoration Fair page, and we're happy to help you. So thank you all for joining and have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.